go away. So now would be a good time. Any other phones up? Nope. Okay. Fantastic. All right. This morning, bright and early, in the sunshiny dark cave that is Tapiz, we are here for the Secure Patterns for Internet Credentials, also known as SPICE. If you think you should be somewhere else, you're wrong. You're here now, and you're stuck. Wahaha. Okay. As with all groups at the IETF, we start with the note well. I know you've seen it several times, but it's worth just putting it back in your head again. This is what's reminding us all about the policies in effect for participating in the IETF and what happens to the information that you share. And also, it's essentially a code of conduct. Make sure that you remember we're all here to make the internet better. So keep it clean, no hits below the belt, no personal attacks, please. If you have any issues along those lines, there's a lot of recourse for you. You can come talk to the chairs, you can talk to the Ombuds team. We want to make this as welcoming an environment as possible. All right, scribes. Do I have any volunteer for scribes today? Just sit here awkwardly, waiting. Scribe, 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 scribe. You're doing half the presentations, Brent. I don't think that would be quite fair. Come on, folks. Just, you don't have to scribe the presentations. It's mostly just the Q&A. You'll do it? All right, you're making the co-chair do it. You all are meanies. All right, we're mostly in document discussion today. I'm going to do just a really quick recap on what is SPICE, depending on how quick it is. How many of you, this is your first SPICE meeting? Okay, cool. Thank you for coming. We like to have new people here. So what is SPICE, right? What we're looking at is digital credentials and presentations and developing the profiles that will support different use cases. I tend to look at this as the top of a stack of some related working groups. At the base of the stack is SCIT, the Supply Chain Integrity, Transparency, and Trust, which is looking so much at the software component of things. On top of that is WMSI, which will be your workload identity for secure multi-system environments. And then all of that needs decent credentials to transfer information back and forth, and that's where we come in. We very much want to make sure that we've got security and privacy built in at the very base of this. This is part of our fundamental considerations. And based on our charter, there's a lot of thought went into what kind of privacy and security considerations are we talking about. We are coordinating with several other working groups, from RATS to OAuth, HOSE, COSE, and as I mentioned, SCIT and WMSI. There's a couple things that are not in scope for what we're doing. General key discovery, not our baby. Creating new cryptographic primitives, so not our baby. Do not do your own crypto, man, it's bad. And again, if you're new, there's several working group resources. We've got a mailing list, as I'm sure you're aware. We have a GitHub repository, and we have a very shiny website. And with that, we're going to get started with Brent and our use case documents. So I click this button. I click this button. And this button.
So I can stand on the X? Or does it matter? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Brent, and I have a problem. I have to start with two apologies. My name is Brent Zundell. First, I apologize that the first half hour of this meeting is me talking at you. The second apology, this is probably the first time most of you have seen my knees. It's making me feel awkward, but we're in Madrid, and so I'm trying to dress for the location. Bangkok taught me pants were bad, so here we are. The use cases draft has gone through quite a bit of revision. We're going to talk about what's happened in it since last we spoke, a little recap of what it is and what the goal is, and a brief conversation about next steps. And I forget the slides are right in front of me. So what is the use cases draft? Why are we doing this thing? The use cases draft is an informative document. Its goal is to describe use cases. Hey, we have an issuer, a holder, a verifier. How do these things interact ideally in use cases that reflect the real world? And we have a pretty wide array of them in the use cases document. If you haven't read it yet, I recommend it. The goal of the use cases document is to help this group have an understanding of where some gaps might be. So if there's a gap in one of the use cases and someone comes up and says, hey, this use case is something I care about, we can identify what additional standardization efforts could be made in line with that use case. So that's the overall goal of the use cases document, is to kind of help this group and inform us and help to guide the work. So since last IETF, and at last IETF, we'll start there. Last IETF, we had a wonderful presentation about a telecom use cases document. It was substantial, and the question last IETF was asked, can these documents be merged? And since then, I believe we can say, yes, these things have been merged. Thanks to Yuran Song and other folks from who had written the other document, we were able to take portions of it, format it so that it matched the existing use cases document and get them into the document. The other efforts that the editors took for this document were to fill out many of the TBD sections. So now there are contributors, there are acknowledgements, there is an incredibly brief security considerations section that says this is a use cases document. Go look elsewhere for those. But most of the TBD sections are now filled out. Which means we have a few next steps. There are 2 open issues. These issues represent the 2 use cases that were originally mapped out that haven't been filled out yet. One is a digital wallets use case. The second is an embedded credentials use case. My inclination is to do nothing for the digital wallets use case, because what does that even mean? Every use case is a digital wallets use case. Like the credential comes to the wallet. The wallet's, the wallet has become such a generically used term. I don't think having a wallet specific use case makes much sense. But if folks disagree with me, I would love to hear it, because then I can ask you to help me format a digital wallets use case. Similarly with embedded credentials, I think embedded credentials sound cool. I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly what that means. What is an embedded credentials use case? Are we talking IoT? Could be. I don't know. If you have a use case and you think, you know what, that could be an embedded credentials use case, please reach out to me, because if nobody does, I'm not going to do anything for that one, because I don't know exactly what it means. So these 2 open issues are invitations to other folks to contribute in ways that they would like to contribute. If nobody does by next IETF, I'm going to close them as no ops. Additionally, we got a review. It was wonderful. I haven't responded. It was so nice. Somebody read the document and said, here are things I don't like. Here are things that don't make sense. We could use more of that invitation. So thank you to our reviewer. We plan to raise issues based on that review and address them moving forward. And now the question to the group: when I think this document is about done, what do we do next? It's informative. I'm still relatively new to the IETF. What happens with informative documents here? What do we do?
So I'm going to jump in on this one, because when we first started the use case document, we actually put it out to the list to say, literally, what do we do with it? And the response was, it's really great to capture this information, but there is no intention to publish it as an RFC, basically keep it in internet draft format. We're open to changing that if we have new information about why it would be useful to have this as an RFC. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong keeping it with it as an internet draft.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense to me, having kind of a, like, more and more people can show up and say, here's my use case, it's not in the document yet. So as soon as I'm done with all the use cases I can think of, I'll say, hey, I'm done with the use cases document.
Yeah, it may be that this document's never really done with either, because that's just how these things work. I put a link in the chat. You won't be able to see that, Brent, but there's a link in the chat to the IESG statement on documents like this, which is worth reading. That'll give you a bit of context and why, generally speaking, they don't end up being published.
Cool.
So that's worth reading for people who don't have that context.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So we've got a handful of folks in the queue. Tim.
Hey, Tim Capelli. I actually think the digital wallet should stay, but not under use cases. I would actually say split out roles into its own section, and credential provider more generic. We have a sore need to define credential provider as a more generic. Wallet is a shitty term. Sorry, bad term. Like, it's just an ambiguous term that nobody really can define. So credential provider, and saying like this is the specific use of a credential provider to hold verifiable digital credentials is super valuable. And even the term holder, if you ask 3 people, you get 3 different answers. Is it the human? Is it the software? Is that? So I think take roles that's in 5.1, make that 6, and then add a credential provider section. I'm happy to help with that because I do think it's a really important role. If we did, second question, if we want to add a use case, just create an issue and a PR, or do you want to do it more?
PR is welcome.
Perfect.
Kathleen.
So I think I was the one reviewer. I think more review would be helpful before you call it done. And I believe one of my, I read a lot of drafts before the meeting, but so I think one of my comments was that it was very narrow to cozy type use cases. And is that the intention for SPICE? So I'm just bringing that to the mic for people who didn't see that comment, and to think, you know, what is the scope of the working group, and what should these use cases cover in terms of thinking about what the working group should be covering?
Yes, thank you for the comment.
Hank?
Yes. Hi, I'm Hank. Oh, this works better than yesterday. It's not unusual to find then remnants of this document in the next document we want to deliver, which is an architectural document that all binds it together. We already heard that in 5.1 there are roles. Reusing roles in different sections does exceed the context of the use case document. We can see that there's a requirement to put all these things together. So I would assume at the very least that these some of these or excerpts of these will inform the architecture document that will then again talk about roles, define them, and actually shed a bit of a light. Is this a human? Is this a application device thing that can be accredited by nations or whatever? I'm talking here wallet use case now. And so, yeah, I guess we will see most of this content condensed into another set of smaller use cases in another document.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I've sort of mentally considered the use cases document as like a less important younger cousin of the architecture document. So I do think they need to be aligned.
Yeah, very quick question. I want to, would you please elaborate what's a embedded credential?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
She said, I clicked on the issue that there's no text other than the title. So I want to know about what's the embedded credential in your mind?
You have as much information as I do. When that document was handed to me, it had a table of contents. One of the things listed in the table of contents was embedded credentials use case, and there's an empty section in the document. So if anybody has an idea what that should mean, I'm open to your interpretation.
Okay.
But yeah, the issues are as full as they can be, and they're completely empty.
Do you have time for 2 seconds?
A quick one. Go ahead,
Rowan May. I'm a little wary about adding new roles so that we have 6 roles instead of 3, particularly because of the charter. So just in comment to a previous comment. Thanks.
Thank you for the comment.
Stop this. Sure. You have to do a lot of clicks, man.
I'm gonna get
A
a
lot
drink
of
of water.
clicks. All right.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brent Zundell. I'm here to talk you through the traceability claims draft. This is a draft that has not been adopted by the working group. We're presenting it here for your consideration. So we're going to talk about that. Traceability claims is just that. There are a lot of traceability desire, like physical goods supply chain, and there are a lot of terms that go along with physical goods supply chain. And these terms don't have associated JWT or CWT claims that are registered. And so as digitization efforts proceed, people are using different terms for these things, and it would be nice to, put a line in the sand, as it were, or a stake down. Basically, the standards of logistics and transport. So providing some of that metadata, it's really just a set of claims. Why do we need this? Digitization is happening. UNCFACT is actively creating profiles and defining things, and there are these nascent traceability vocabularies that are being produced. Most people are like, yeah, JSON, that's a good idea. We should do that. We should use VCs. We should use ST.VC. We should, they're building these things, and some of them are, showing up in regulations. These things are happening, and yet the actual shape of how you turn a bill of lading into a credential is sometimes fuzzy. And so it would be nice if bills of lading had a claim set that they could draw upon, for example. There's also a lot of interest in CBOR because some of these documents are ginormous, and the smaller they can get, the easier it will be for a ship at sea to transmit it to a port, for example. So there is a need for these things, and this supply chain traceability claims document is an attempt to register some of these. And really it's just a list of claims and an ask for IANA to register them in the CWT and JWT area. So for example, shipment ID, bill of lading number, HS code, import code, country of origin, these are all things that are used and show up in a lot of different trade documents. And so it would be handy to have a way to officially say this is a bill of lading number. For example, here's a product description. If you were shipping organic blueberries from Canada, you would have in your trade manifest this document that says, hey, these are organic blueberries from Canada. Here's our ID for them. They came from Canada. There's an HS code that points to exactly the type of product that it is, and it says there's 5,050 kilograms of them. Yay, a lot of blueberries. You better keep them between 1 and 3.5 degrees. The value of these is $83,335, so don't you mess with these blueberries. And that's in US dollars. They are going to be shipped from Canada to the US, so those are the legal jurisdictions that matter, and they have these regulatory compliances attached to them. So it's this set of information transmitted from the Canadian grower and seller to the American importer and buyer, along with US Customs would also be involved, and these people need to know that regulatory compliance codes means the same thing at every spot. Okay, so what do you think?
Well, we've, wait, it's locked? Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. I think we had Yaron first.
Yaron Sheffer, sorry for nitpicking, but it's kind of strange to have 3 claims that are dealing with measurable quantities and don't have the units, so temperature and weight.
I agree. That's why the units are described in the claim. The value is an amount in kilograms. We just said, let's keep it simple. Everything is kilograms. But I open to changing that. That's fine with me.
I missed that. Is that true for the temperature as well?
Yes, temperature in Celsius.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm
Go ahead.
Rowan May. I like the idea of this. I think that there should be more description of semantics, and I'd actually encourage you to break out the information into different categories, because I think there's going to be a lot of additional information. So, for example, the minimum and maximum temperature, that's a handling requirement, whereas somebody might want to include they might want to include the actual temperatures that were experienced during various stages of delivery, and that's a different semantic. You don't want somebody using that field to describe what the observed minimum and maximum were. You want to be able to have a different thing for that. Likewise, for example, if you had a maximum acceptable G factor for the number of G's of force that were experienced on the product, there are tons and tons of things that you could add. And so making a bit of a hierarchy and describing what are the categories of places where people might add new things instead of just a linear list, which just basically just a registration. I think that'd be a good way to evolve this document. Thanks.
Okay. I thank you for the comment. Is that something that you would like to see modified in the document before it's presented to the group for adoption, or could we adopt it and then work on it in that way?
I think I would like to see maybe some examples on the list that show in that direction, but I don't think it needs another draft before we could have an adoption call, as long as people thought that that's a reasonable way to go.
Peter?
Hi, Brent. This is Peter, Huawei. Before I joined Huawei, I actually worked for UI to do some traceability product built on top of blockchains. So I have some experience on that. So the question I have is that some information that during this traceability, this transport could change, and some does not. So some endorsement, so number one thing to care about is the endorsement. So when you have compliance codes, like who is going to change, who is going to sign for those or endorse for that compliance codes, that's something to care about for number one. And number two is that during a transportation, some information is going to change, like which port it has been to, what maybe the temperature has changed, or what situation has been through. So to split what informations are changeable during the process and some what are not. So it would be useful. It's just a comment.
Thank you.
So Mike Jones, full disclosure, working as a consultant, I've worked on the draft. I am not an expert in supply chain or the particular claims. What I did help write was claim definitions that are unambiguous and IANA consideration sections that will probably make IANA reasonably happy. I would support adopting this and then having the working group apply their expertise to what should the claim definitions be and how are they structured. I mean, I was willing to work on this in part because the two co-authors are working in that space commercially, and so do have some credible experience with making such statements, although not in this data format. Rohan, if you want specific things, I would file an issue. That's what we do, as you know. He jests, not totally. I think I've said my piece, and you can't see my knees.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Hank?
Jesus. Hi, this is Hank. Speaking from experience, it is relatively hard to use a standardized unit as the field due to the reason that you have to do a transformation. It is never the unit that you expect. It is maybe even some weird units like metric exceeds metrics somehow. So this is from experience from supply chain in general and also from other domains of application. Then we could use, it's just a proposal from the 8428 RFC, that is CNML. There's a registration for a lot of units there already. So we don't have to reinvent that wheel. I know it's unwieldy, and in theory, it's more elegant if you just use a standard SI unit. I actually feel you there. I would like to do that as well. It turns out there are so many weird things out there that just copied from a piece of paper, and nobody, first of all, can or wants to do this transformation. And in the end, that can be imprecision because now if you talk about resolution and where you stop.
Thank you for the comment.
Kathleen Moriarty, my question is, do we have enough representatives of supply chain pieces to at least get an initial set? We could always leave, the registry can always have added pieces on. And I'm asking just because, like, I currently have a student who's doing a capstone on supply chain, and she is exploring a completely different area, which, maybe there's some useful contributions, but there's probably other areas too, because I just have a very random sampling. So maybe there's something that we could do, either a workshop or somehow raise awareness to try to vet what an initial set of claims would be from that type of expertise to pull it in. I'm not sure how, but
yeah, that sounds great. So for the group's information, there's like 5 or 6 documents that are the most common. There's bill of lading, there's a purchase order, there's the payment that I'm not remembering the name of, for example, that exists in almost every transfer of goods flow, and it was that document set that informed the claims that were suggested here. But happy to go through and be like, here's where these came from, here's why they're here, and here's why there aren't more. I think that would be a very valuable exercise.
okay, great. And she's exploring luxury goods. So I'm guessing that's probably not in your subset.
Right, yeah.
So there's probably other things. So the randomness of what gets put in is what I'm raising.
Yeah, all good comments, thank you. What would chairs like to see as next steps for this?
So staring at Martin to make sure I'm not over speaking, I think having some more discussion on the list would be best at this point. I don't want to quite put it out to a working group adoption call. Let's get some more of these questions hashed out. One more draft, and then I think we can do it.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. This. This one.
I should, yeah. Hi, my name is Brent Zundell. This is Spice Glue. We've presented glue a number of times. This is a working group adopted document. I'm going to give a brief recap of what glue is and why it exists, the changes since last IETF, and some suggested next steps. So recap, why does glue exist and why do we need it? We make online statements about organizations. We call these credentials. We need a way in those credentials to refer to entities. For the supply chain use case, who's the seller, who's the buyer, what is the port organization that you're going through all of these things. We need to be able to identify them. And ideally a consistent and clear way to identify them. There are so many different identifiers that are out there. There are some that are attempting global adoption, such as the LEI. Of the hundreds of millions of companies in the world, a whole 3 million of them have an LEI. That's useful, that's handy, but there are millions and millions that don't. There are millions that only have, that rather they have a DUNS number, or they have a Bangkok mercantile number or something of that. And so we would like some consistency in using these various identifiers. And attached to that, some of the models that we use require these things to be a URN in their format, thus glue. It's a namespace. Right now it's URN, IETF, SPICE, glue, and then the identifier with letting you know what the identifier is. I should update this slide because IRS IEN is not in the list. But anyway, glue. It's really simple. Here are the initial set of registry contents in the document: the GLN, the LEI, the DUNS, and the PEN. Happy to consider more, but this is the set that is there now. The document also establishes not only a glue identifier registry, or glue, it establishes a SPICE identifier, or a SPICE namespace. Glue namespace, I'm using the wrong words. Glue namespace, SPICE namespace, so that we can fit glue under SPICE. That's the current status of the draft. At this point, we have, since last IETF, we addressed all of the remaining open issues. That required approximately no changes to the document. The one substantial change was I updated my affiliation. Actually, I'm not even sure I'm the one that did that. But anyway, this is what happened. So I think Mike did that. So we haven't got a lot of feedback from the group besides one awesome review, which we appreciate. And so next steps for this document are we're going to address the issues that we're going to raise based on that review. We are still considering organizational namespaces to include in the registry, but really are looking for feedback from the group. Which ones do you think absolutely need to be added at this point? Because once existing, the registry will be there for more to be added whenever they're needed. And question to the group, after all these issues or that, the review, after we address those, would it be appropriate to suggest a working group last call for this?
Yaron?
Yaron Sheffer, if we ever expect this URN to have a legal significance, then I would suggest to add a national level so that nations can define their own registration procedures rather than everybody piling on the IANA who doesn't know anything about, the legal implications of whatever.
So it would be a registry of nation or national ID schemes that could then be pointed to, like here's the set of schemes used
I think that would be too complicated. Just an extra level for it, like ES for Spain.
So the reason we didn't do that at the outset, because that's a suggestion we've gotten before, is because some of the identifiers are global. They don't have a national namespace at all. So the way the document currently handles that is it says if it is a US namespace, it's expected that, that will be part of the identifier for, for that block right at the end there. It'll be, so the SPICE glue, and then where it says DUNS, that would actually say, US and the number. So that's a recommendation currently in the document. If folks feel strongly that that should still be a separate block of the identifier, I'm not opposed to that, but I think we would have to have a conversation.
So again, my point is more about registration procedures than the actual syntax.
Okay, thank you.
So Mike Jones, I'm going to respond to Yaron's comment. Excuse me. So as many of you know, I'm a big believer in the efficacy of IANA and the process. We already will have, once this goes to IESG review, we'll get these URNs registered, the namespaces. The IETF glue one and the subname space IETF glue or IETF spice glue. And then anybody can register anything that meets the criteria under URN IETF spice glue, including the sovereign nation of España could register the country code ES underneath that if they choose, using the normal IANA procedures. At most, I think we could put instructions to the designated experts that ISO two-letter country codes are not to be registered other than by nation states. And that would be fine. But I don't think we should prejudge that corporate identifiers are even going to be bound to particular countries. In many cases, they're international organizations.
And in many cases, they are not, of course. And again, my point is not being able to register the ES name. My point is for ES or someone in ES to be able to manage the subtree for ES.
Thank you. Yeah. I think testing the guidance for the designated experts would be appropriate to make sure that's covered. I agree.
Okay, we've got Robert Remote, then Leif, and then I've closed the queue.
I advise against using the two-letter codes. They have been reused. I've researched this. As I pointed to the chat, 3166-1 is the definitive UN ISO code for nations, which will never be reused. It's a 4-digit designation. Use that. Then I think it's -3, which gets down to territorial levels, where nations can register their territories with the UN accordingly. So there is a nation recognized coding, which will map to two letters and other things by the appropriate ISO UN organization. And we just hook onto that. I've already had to deal with this elsewhere.
Thank you for that
Thank
information.
you.
Leif?
So, Leif Johansson, what happens if or when Dun & Bradstreet or ISO comes along and wants to register URN : DUNS and produces documentation for that? How will the semantics overlap or conflict, or what happens?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
I mean, anybody can write up an RFC and go through the standards process for creating a URN, so a URN namespace. What's stopping Dun & Bradstreet from registering URN : DUNS? And then there are two different branches now containing Dun & Bradstreet numbers. Are they different? Will they have different semantic?
I wouldn't expect them to have different semantics. They both should point to the same entity. I agree it's a proliferation of identifiers, but I agree that's a potential problem, but I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I think we should sort of assume that that's going to happen. I don't think that there is any big risk that individual countries or regions will come along and register URL namespaces. That's fairly unlikely, I think. But I don't think it is unlikely that, like, Dun & Bradstreet will decide that there is something wrong with the way we describe their, identifiers in this draft, and then decide, no, we're going to do our own. And at the very least, I think it would be a good idea to talk to them and make sure that they are okay, with the way we've represented the semantic, and the same thing for LEIs and GLNs, so that we don't, well, at least not have a problem in the future if they decide that our representation isn't good.
Oh, okay. As far as the semantics of the DUNS specific identifier, that's whatever DUNS says it is anyway.
Yeah, no.
In our draft. So I agree that we should have conversations with these folks. I've talked to GS1 and Glyph already about it. DUNS is ginormous. I haven't found anybody to talk to there. So
Yeah.
I will attempt.
Yeah.
Thank you for the comment.
I mean, in general, I think it is a little bit iffy to sort of grab somebody's namespace and put it into your branch of something, right? Because, there is a risk that they decide, no, we want it over here and we want it to mean something else. Anyway,
Okay, we need to wrap up on this one. It sounds like there's still some more discussion to have on list. So That's the homework.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mailing list conversation. Thank you. Beltram, you're going to be up next. And this one, this one, this one, and then this one, this one, this one. Yes.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to try to be quick on this one since the beginning is also been like straightforward. Like the goal here is to register 19 left OpenID Connect claims for CBOR Web tokens. So as I said, so there are 20 claims. So we're trying to register 19. So except the subject claim, which has already been registered, so no need for that one. And we're going to go for standard action, meaning because most of those claims are pretty prominent whenever you're dealing with user information. So going for standard action is going to allow us to register those within the 2-byte ranges. So all of us are here, I think, to spare some bytes over the wire. So that's the intent. So here is the list of all those claims. So that's a screenshot from the specification. It's cropped, but you have all the 19 here. What I wanted to draw your attention on is that it's a one-on-one mapping of what exists in the OpenID Connect. So like the semantic is exactly the same. The description is the same, and the data type is the same, except for 2, which are the address, which has now become a CBOR mapping, and birth date, birth date is the same, but actually it's not using RFC 9581. It's like a text string in ISO 8601 format. The intent was also to ease adoption of this draft, and not because those things are going to have to be implemented, and most of the time whenever you switch from JOT to COT, it's mostly about the data format that changes, and it's not like a different type of credential. So I wanted this to be like an exact one-on-one mapping of what already existed. So what happened since Bangkok? So now it's an IETF draft, and Mac Jones has reviewed it and has also joined the co-author, so I would like to thank him. And most of the changes are about, so I learned that OIDC is a trademark, so it has been renamed to OpenID Connect throughout all the draft. And about the next step, so like I already posted that on the list, so I suggested we are going to ask for working blast call in here. So my question to the group is like, shall we do it, basically? And that's it for me. Up to you.
Anyone have questions, thoughts, comments, support for taking it to last call? I saw a thumbs up. How many of you have read this draft? Okay, so there's some homework. It would be helpful for more people to actually read the draft before we take it to last call, I think. That said, I think we can do that certainly before the next IETF meeting. So do I have anyone willing to put their hand up saying you will in fact read the draft that hasn't already read it?
It's a short draft.
Yeah, it's very straightforward, yeah.
That got more enthusiasm, good. I saw Kathleen. Others willing to read it, review it, look at it, short draft? Leif. Okay. Okay. All right, that's a good start. Anyone else? Any other thoughts, comments on this one? All right, we have homework. Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for being appreciated.
Leif, you're going to be up next. This one's going to be short too. Yeah.
Unless people want a rat hole on naming, which would be fun. This is about an architecture draft for direct presentation flows. This is not a working group document. I actually haven't asked for group adoption, really. And the draft was actually started before SPICE was created. I'm not 100% sure still that this actually works or is even a good idea. But, it might be. I got a couple of very good reviews, notably from Ori and from Watson Lad. And it kind of highlighted what the problem is with writing an architecture draft like this, because at least in my mind, it has to make some normative statements. Otherwise, there's absolutely no use to having something like this. Well, unfortunately, this collided with or coincided with the EU writing a bunch of implementing acts that I had to review. And so it kind of went on the bottom of the pile. So I haven't actually done anything with the reviews. Brett has offered to help out. So we're going to look at it. But really, one of the things that it would be really good to have feedback on now that I have everybody in the room are two things. One of them is, are the normative claims more or less correct in the architecture draft? Right? And the second one is, can we please find a better name for this thing than digital wallet or identity wallet or something? I think, I don't know if everybody agrees we need to find a better name, but I talk to enough people who agree. That makes me think it is a good idea to at least try to find a specific, maybe not a marketing term, but certainly a technical term that describes the thing that receives a credential and presents a presentation proof, that isn't sort of just fraught with overloaded meaning that wallets are today. So if somebody has a suggestion for a better name, I'd be very, very happy to hear from you. If not, I'm gonna, in the next version, which I hope will get dropped sometime soon after the IETF, use something like user credential agent or something like something neutral that I know nobody would ever write in a marketing document, but would actually help maybe the specification clarity. Go ahead, Henk.
Yes, hi, this is Henk. Just to recap, I don't remember this myself, so I made a note. So at the moment, we don't want to use the term wallet, probably, maybe, I don't know. A wallet is composed of the security crypto device, secure crypto application, right? So typically it's a composite already. Mm-hmm. So when you leave the wallet away, it pretty much looks like an HSM to me. Yeah. So calling something an HSM is just happening in LAMPS. You should hear the discussions there right now, which I'm listening into. So maybe that is not the greatest idea, but it is a combination of a responsible, sentient human being and a technology. Yep. And we can do some weasel wording and try out a few terms, I think. And I can help you with that because it is a very common problem, especially because when you have a remote wallet, again, we don't want to say wallet here, but that definitely is already an HSM. Yeah. So maybe there's some similarities here we can play with and find something. And it's a good likeness, and people still use the term HSM for the collective thing, right? Yeah. Even though we all know that there is an FPGA in there, and there's exactly. So we need the collective term, right? We need something. Yeah, but to have the collective term, you need the organs have to place them a little bit, and then understand what we can call the composite. And there's some good terminology bits in the ARF, but I don't really want to make it like tied to the EU spec, because the ARF has kind of turned into a shit show. Doesn't need our help. Doesn't need our help,
Do you want a rat hole here?
Okay. Yes. For as long as Heather wants content for this TV show,
Yeah, I mean, the term, the circles, for lack of a better term, I'm in, we've really centralized on credential provider, because most of these are also going to hold a user's passkeys, right? They're going to hold other credentials. It's not just digital credentials. Then you can have a more specific version of a credential provider that may be called an identity wallet, because it's purpose built. It only does digital credentials, right? So that's like architecturally in a diagram, when you talk about the digital credentials API and all these pieces, the credential provider is this piece of software that, to Hank's point, has all these other pieces underneath that then interfaces with other components. So that's been my suggestion to date, and I'm happy to write up a more detailed.
Rat hole away.
Yeah.
Hank is ready to take it on.
Yeah, just quick add on to that. So yeah, there's an intent here. that typically we can combine with the role, but there's also the capability of the foundation that you use, and it's relatively important to understand how presentation actually is supported by the thing the sentient human, hopefully sentient human being uses. And again, there's a subtle demarcation line that is important here to know how to handle these two things separately sometimes in context and giving them names. That's correct, but not just go with the intent.
But by the way, I mean, I agree with the intent. While you're at the mic, there was one review comment around the use of the word attestation that would conflict with whatever rats came up with. So if there is anybody who has strong opinions about possible overlapping use of terminology between spice and rats, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Theodosius?
Just a short remark on the, with the risk of starting a discussion on the term of provisioning, unless there is actually credentials provisioning, calling something a provider would include or indicate a whole process of actually creation and provisioning of a credential, which may not be the intention here. My suggestion is that the credential management agent is fine. If you want it to be even more generic, credential management point could be the a reasonably neutral term for the entry point of that thing, and then you can separate storage, provisioning, and so on, because they're different functions.
One problem with credential provider is that in similar, not the same, but similar spaces, we have identity providers, OpenID providers, which are much more analogous to the issuer role in this world.
Yes.
So I really worry about the potential confusion implications of using it in the context of the wallet thing. Though I agree that wallet is a terrible term.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, but it would be nice to at least make this is probably the last chance to get rid of it. Let's put it that way.
Noted.
But for the record, Brian, I think you're right that there is a risk there with the term provider, and it kind of goes to the previous commenters sort of about provisioning being part of kind of the term provider. But, yeah.
Hey, Tim, you get the last comment.
But don't we typically think of a wallet as replacing an OpenID provider for a user in a distributed manner?
See, now that you dig
Not
into
the
it.
issuer, but the role of a runtime exchange of claims. Okay, that's my only counter. But I don't really. Yeah. Sure.
All right, I think we have some interesting
We
hallway
done?
conversations going to happen in 5, 4, no, soon. Cool. All right.
That's it.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
If people want to have further discussions and help with that draft, that would be greatly appreciated. All right. Last up is Rohan.
Hello, hello. I'm Rowan. So we had quite a few changes to SDCOT since last ITF. There's quite a big list here. The first 4 bullets are represented by individual slides. So I'm going to start with things near the bottom. Is this a little laser pointer? Yeah, look at that. So some of the small things, we wrote up a default algorithm for SDAlg, which is SHA-256. In the key binding token, there was a statement that said that the issuer and subject need to match there was some language in there basically making this a totally redundant extra, both totally redundant extra fields. So those have now been removed and forbidden in the key binding token. Also makes the example smaller, which is kind of nice. Clarified the handling of the audience. clarified that the ordering of disclosures for nested claims can be in whatever order the sender wants to put them in, who's doing the presentation, and that those consequences could be. So could result in better performance, it could leak some privacy, et cetera, depending on what order the presenter does that, and it's entirely in the presenter's control. Made the CDDL self-consistent. Thank you, Karsten, for finding some errors there. And then the to be redacted tag was IANA registered but never actually defined, so added a short section on that. All right, so on the larger changes, so we highlighted this. There was actually PR for this in Bangkok, which had been merged, but that was after the draft had been submitted. So this is now merged. This is now in the document. The value in a disclosure is always the second item. So there is, if you have an array, it's obviously always going to be the second item. If it is a value in a map, then it also is going to be the second item in the array. That's in there. All the examples now use that format. This makes it a little bit faster and yeah, it's sort of consistent with a natural way of working on this. It's just something that's different between SDCOT and SDJOT. Likewise, we already highlighted this one as well. We changed the sorry, let me rewind a tiny bit. So in the previous version of the document, we redefined or updated CBOR web tokens to allow new types of keys. So tagged keys that are tags and keys that had simple values. Mike Jones pointed out that it wasn't necessary for us to actually update COT. We could just define that SDCOT is a new format based on CBOR web tokens. And then we don't actually have to update CBOR web tokens. So we massaged the text a little bit, and we changed that text. The result inside of an SDCOT is still the same. You use a simple value as the tag, as shown right there. That's also expressed in the examples. One consequence of that is that the media type is now SD-CWT and not SD plus CWT. All right, now for the fireworks. So previously I added a stub for encrypted disclosures. So this has been renamed to AEAD encrypted disclosures. What is AEAD? It is, let's see. Additionally, authenticated encryption with additional data. And so why do we want this? So as it turns out, there are some non-trivial protocols that have some kind of an internal structure for their verifiers. And so it's very useful to be able to disclose claims to one part of the verifier, but not to others. And so 2 examples, RATs, where you could have a workload appraiser, a platform appraiser, they need different information, and you don't necessarily want to share one with the other. Likewise, in MLS, one use that motivated me for this was the ability to have a set of claims, some of which are disclosed to the members and the distribution service, and others which are visible only to the members inside of the group. The mechanics of this are fairly straightforward. There is a disclosure which gets encrypted with an AED algorithm with a unique nonce. The encrypted claim contains the nonce, the ciphertext, and the corresponding authentication tag. The authentication tag is broken out so that it can be used as an index to find the encrypted claim more easily. So there was an issue. Why shouldn't we use COSE for this? So as it turns out, these protocols are already using AED directly in the wild. There's a lot of usage of it. And they already have appropriate key management, which is in some cases much more sophisticated than what is provided in COSE. And in addition, these systems often don't use COSE for anything other than for, sort of on the edge of those protocols. And so they don't use COSE inside of the rest of the architecture. Now, okay, so if we're not using COSE, how do we know that this is safe? The reason is that we are only using algorithms in the IANA AEAD algorithms registry. All of those are authenticated because of the first A in AEAD, and all of them are reasonably modern. We don't have, MD5 in there as a hash. We don't have, RSA with something. We don't have AES in CBC mode or something, right? Now, if you've never heard of this registry and you want to go look it up, the URL is conveniently located there. You can go have a look yourself. You can Google the IANA AEAD algorithms registry. It will come up as the first hit. And finally, there is a default algorithm, which is AES 128 GCM. All right. Wow, everybody must still be asleep. Life.
So not having read the draft, very interesting. But are there any like privacy guarantees here or any privacy considerations? I mean, if you're basically doing, it looks again like that you're doing basically a version, the AEAD version of salted hash, selected disclosures.
So all of the disclosures, the privacy considerations of a disclosure, you need to be careful of unlinkability and all of the things that are listed in the privacy consideration section of the draft. It's the only difference is that instead of sending the disclosure, you're sending an encrypted version of the disclosure. The same privacy considerations apply.
Well, my specific question is that let's say you have a selected disclosure to like the group members and the distribution service of an MLS setup. Can those two parts, those two subsystems collude and glean information that they couldn't together? Are there collusion aspects in the sort of the second level of selected disclosure that isn't present in?
Yeah, so the simple answer to your question is, it is possible to collude, but no more so than it was possible to collude without these disclosures. So in other words, if I sent, instead of using an encrypted disclosure, if I sent a message which contained the same information, hi, my real name is such and such, a member that shared that with the distribution service, that would have the same privacy implications as sharing the encrypted disclosure inside of the group with the same information.
But it doesn't make it worse, is my question. Right?
It doesn't make it worse.
And the same question for one of the major criticisms against hash-based selected disclosure is that it doesn't provide for protection against issuer verifier collusion, right? So does this make that worse?
It doesn't make it worse. And all of those, there's, well, as I'll was about to get to here. Whoops. We substantially rewrote the security and privacy consideration sections. And so there's actually quite a nice long description of unlinkability and all of those issues in the draft now. Okay. So in terms of other changes that don't have a substantial technical change, as I mentioned, we registered the media type as SD-COT instead of SD+COT. The key binding token is KB plus CWT, since it is the key binding token is a COT. And there is now also a prefix plus SD-CWT if somebody wants to make a new format, a new media type, which is derived from an SD COT. We also added a new diagram at the beginning of the document. Particularly curious how people find that, if they find that to be instructive or illustrative. The security and privacy consideration section was substantially rewritten. Thank you very much, Ori, and Mike Jones also provided some substantial comment on that. There is a verifiable credential type identifiers registry, a bunch of terminology improvements. All the examples in the draft and in the repository are now in deterministic order. So the keys are sorted according to the sorting rules in section 4.21, I think, of RFC 8949. This makes it easy to do test vectors and to compare the CBOR against another CBOR that was generated by another implementation. We have a description of trust lists now. The validation steps were just sort of like a nice big blob of text. Those have been broken up into numbered bullet items or numbered list items. There's now, let's see, this was already merged, but wasn't in the document before, but there's a Rust implementation in the implementation status section. Thank you, Beltran. All the examples are now regenerated, of course, correct signatures, salts, hashes, and dates. That's actually now gotten a little bit easier to do. I'm getting much faster at regenerating the examples. And finally, we did an overall consistency cleanup and fixed some references. All right, there are no open PRs at the moment, and there are 7 issues. I think the only one we want to use Kose thumbprint as a valid confirmation method. I think that should be pretty non-controversial. Next steps are to keep cranking. Thanks very much.
Yeah, we've actually got a little bit of time if there's anyone you want to focus on to get some in-room discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these issues are pretty, there is one issue that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. There's nothing I can't really write a PR for it yet, but in the examples, we would like, and in the text, we would like to make the media types which are used, instead of using a text string media type, we would like to make it a should use the content format integer values defined in this, in the content format registry. We can't actually start using them in the examples until we do the early IANA registration. Once we get those numbers, then I can put those in the document and change the examples. Does anyone object to using the content format values integers instead of a text string media type in the examples? And does anyone object to that being a should in the document? It's shorter.
Mike?
Is there any disadvantage to recommending people do that?
So, Mike Jones, I had suggested this because it's Coze-like. And you'll notice that for the Coze header parameters that are equivalents of media types, there's also the possibility to use the COAP content formats registry, which I believe our friend Karsten helped create. And it seemed like this would be a parallel thing to define a set of numbers that are short that could be used instead of these identifier strings.
Yeah, there's already an INN registry entry to ask for those values. The question now is, do we say you should use those values instead of using the longer text?
Coze just says you can use either.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make it a should. I would leave it up to deployments. But in all of our examples, sure, let's use numbers. And I'll correct one thing you said, that given this is a new registry that we're defining, we can define the initial numbers because we're the ones requesting them, so we can start using them.
Sorry, which registry are you referring to, Mike?
The, boy, I'm not awake. The one for the, not the media types, but the credential types. And maybe we're talking about a different thing, and I should just sit down.
Yeah, the COPE values, those are using the existing registry that's used by COPE formats. So they're already, like several dozen or like a small hundreds in there. So it would be using
sure,
that.
For media types, we're using an existing registry.
Right.
I was talking about the proposed registry in the draft for credential types.
You mean for the VC, verifiable credential types?
Yes.
Okay, we currently don't actually have an example. So if somebody wants an example, then we can use the values for credential types that are in our own registry, but at the moment we have no example.
Okay, sorry for the confusion from the microphone.
Carson.
Yeah, just to get the terminology soup right here. The registry is part of the core parameters registry, and it's called the content formats registry. So those may be better terms than COAP values.
The problem is that most people who see content format registry on a slide are not going to necessarily associate it with COAP. In any case, it says content format registry in the document when it registers those values.
Yeah. So just don't confuse people by using different terms outside the document.
Okay. Yeah, the bottom three things, the bottom four things here are just work. The move implementation specific validation to an appendix, that's just work. And so it's really, we've discussed this item here about using the content format integers instead of media type strings, and the cozy key thumbprint as a valid confirmation method. So there's an issue there. If you feel strongly that you should not be able to do this, please comment. Otherwise, I'm going to stick an example. I'm going to use the nested example to put a cozy key thumbprint inside of the example that happens to also be the nested example in the next rev of the draft. Also, I think we have made substantial progress. I think the document is quite easy to read. I think it's in good shape. We're going to turn the crank and try to get these done fairly soon, and would very much like to get a last call as soon as we have closed these issues. Thanks very much.
All right. So that was our last document under discussion. Thank you all for coming this morning. And as soon as you wake up, I want you to go actually review the documents. That would also be very helpful, and provide comments either on the mailing list or in our GitHub repository. That would be fantastic. The acoustics in this room were not ideal. Right. So, but I've been looking at the LiveScribe transcript, and it was okay. So if you need to go back for some clarification, that would probably be the place to go. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Yes. I wish I could remember his last name, Roy, was working at Microsoft and stayed on the long-term identity stuff and Skip and Whimsy. He got laid off 6 weeks ago. There's a woman here, Nicole, who's stepped into that role. I think getting her as some fresh eyes on this would be really good. Yeah, so she and I had a brief chat. I met her yesterday and had a brief chat, and I know she's interested in the work, so I'm going to tap her.
I came here 5 minutes later. There was a system. Very, very active in the civil society of Germany, especially when it comes to things that are disclosed in supervision, disclosed in every house. I understand that you are an expert and liaison in this domain, and so I wanted to connect each other. You can hear for that. Yes.
Correct, about the acoustics being bad, hence me coming up to ask a question. The traceability claims. The traceability claims. It's not also but I I'm trying to sort out.